Hi guys, good morning everyone. Online students, is my voice audible? Very good. Guys, in the last session, we discussed about what is Redis cache and why we need to go for Redis cache. In today's session, we are going to understand another important topic in the microservices, which is called circuit breaker. Another important topic in the microservices, which is called circuit breaker. So first of all, this circuit breaker is an electric topic. This is an electric topic. In our house, power supply will be available from the main. Okay. From the main, the power supply will go to fridge, TV, AC, lights, fans, and all. So the power will come from transformer to our house main board. From the main board, that power will be supplied to all the electric items that we are using in our house. Now, why this circuit breaker is available for the power supply? This circuit breaker is going to handle fault situations in the power supply. Sometimes high voltage power will come from the transform to our house. Sometimes low voltage power will come to our house from the transformer. If a high voltage power comes or if low voltage power comes to our house, in both scenarios, our electric items will be damaged. In the both if high power comes or if low power comes, in the both situations, the electric items will be damaged in our house. So in order to avoid this fault, in the power supply, we are going to use a concept called circuit breaker in our house. We are going to use a concept called circuit breaker in our house. Now, this circuit breaker will protect our electric items when there is a high voltage power or when there is a low voltage power in our house. Fine, that is okay. So this is an electric topic which is used to deal with the power supply. Let us see here, circuit breaker. So this is a circuit breaker. Can you read this point now? Circuit breaker is an electrical switch designed to protect an electrical circuit from the damage caused by overcurrent or short current. If over high voltage power comes or if low voltage power comes, in both situations it is a problem. Okay. Now, whenever there is a problem in the power supply, circuit breaker will switch on, then circuit breaker will stop the power supply to our house. So it is going to protect our electric items. High voltage power is coming or low voltage power is coming. Then immediately circuit breaker will turn on. Circuit breaker will stop the power supply to our house so that our items will not get damaged. Are you clear? Now, similarly, this circuit breaker concept we are going to implement in our microservices. Circuit breaker topic we are going to implement in our microservices. Sir, in which scenario we need to implement this circuit breaker in our microservices? Assume that I have developed one microservice. So in this microservice, there is one method is available which is called M1 method. There is a method is available which is called M1 method. This M1 method is responsible to get the data from the Redis server. So this M1 method is responsible to connect with the Redis server and get the required information from the Redis server. Are you guys clear? I am having one REST API. Inside, that is a microservice. In that microservice, there is a M1 method is available. Inside that M1 method, we have implemented the logic to get the data from the Redis server. That's okay. Now, so many requests are coming to our application. so many requests are coming to our application. Whenever the user requests are coming, M1 method is executing. That M1 method is getting the data from the Redis server. Okay. But today, from morning 6 a.m. onwards, our Redis server is not working. The Redis server that we have configured, that server is down due to some issue. That Redis server got crashed. If the Redis server got crashed, then what will happen to our application? Guys, if the Redis server is crashed, then what will happen to our application? What will happen to our application? Come on, guys. What will happen to our application? When user request comes to our application, M1 method is executing. M1 method will try to get the data from the Redis server, but Redis server is not working from today morning. Then exception will occur. Exception will occur. Now, whenever this exception is occurred, the response will go as a error response to the client. The response will go to the client as a error response. I don't want to send error response to the client. I don't want to send error response to the client. Now, in our scenario, what we have done is we have created one more method called M2 method. M2 method is responsible to get the data from the database. So there is a M2 method is available which is responsible to get the data from the database. M1 method is available. M2 method is available. M1 method is responsible to get the data from the Redis. M2 method is responsible to get the data from the database. In my scenario, the requirement is M1 is our main method. Always whenever the request comes, we need to get the data from the Redis by using M1 method. But whenever there is a problem in the M1 method, then I want to execute M2 method as a fallback method. So whatever the data is available in the database, same data is available in the Redis also. I'm trying to get the data from the Redis. If I am not able to get the data from the Redis, then I want to get the data from the database. So here M1 method is the main important method for us. M2 method is our fallback method. Fallback method. Fallback method. Okay. What is the meaning of that fallback method? What is the meaning of that fallback method? Come on. What is the meaning of the fallback method? What is the meaning of fallback method, guys? When the main logic is not executing, I want to execute the secondary logic. When main method is, that M1 method is important method to get the logic. When main method is failed to execute the logic, then I want to execute the fallback method. Fallback method nothing but step by function. When M1 method is failed, then I want to execute the M2 method, which will send the response to the client. My intention is I don't want to send error response to the client. I don't want to send error response to the client. I want to send some response to the client even though there is a problem in our application. So if the Redis server is having a problem, then I want to send the data by retrieving from the database. So the method which will execute on behalf of M1 method is called fallback method. Are you guys clear? So in the microservices development, we are going to develop fallback logic like this. We are going to develop fallback logic like this. Now, let's see the example here. File, new, Spring Starter project. So here I'm taking the application name as 50 Spring Boot Circuit Breaker application. Spring Boot Circuit Breaker application. Click on next. So let us select the dependency. I'm selecting a dependency called Spring Web. I'm selecting a dependency called DevTools. Let us select a dependency called Circuit Breaker. There is a dependency called Circuit Breaker dependency is available. That Circuit Breaker dependency which is having resilience 4J. So what is the dependency we need to select it to work with the Circuit Breaker? Resilience 4J dependency we have to select. Select that dependency, next and finish. Okay. So with this, I have created application with a number 50. For this application, I'm using Resilience 4J dependency. Resilience 4J dependency means it is used to implement circuit breaker for our application. Okay. So let me go here, check the dependencies that are selected in the pom.xml. Go to pom.xml. Inside the pom.xml, here, web starter is available, which is used to develop the REST controllers for our application. What is this new dependency, guys? Spring Cloud, Starter, Circuit Breaker, Resilience 4J. So we have selected Resilience 4J to implement Circuit Breaker in our application. For now, let's create one simple REST controller, new class. I'm getting one REST controller, message REST controller. Keep that inside a REST package. Message REST controller got created. Represent this as a REST controller by using @REST controller annotation. By using @REST controller annotation. Inside this, I'm writing one method, public string get data from Redis. Get data from the Redis. Now, here some logic will be available. Finally, we are going to return, okay, data fetching from Redis. Data fetching from Redis. This is the logic. For this logic, I'm mapping this method to URL pattern, which is get mapping slash data. Get mapping slash data. So this is my REST controller method. That's it. Go to the resources, properties file, server.port. I am mapping this to a port number 9090. Let me change from the properties file to YML file. I'm changing this from the properties file to YML file, server.port 9090. Let's update this project. Maven, update the project. Maven, update the project. Force update for this Maven project. Let us run as boot application. Run as boot application. Okay. Clear the console. Try to access this project now. Localhost colon 9090/data. So method is executed as expected. Data we are fetching from the Redis server. For example, in this method, if there is some exception, then what will happen? Now, earlier, when I send the request for the method, we are able to get the data from this method. For example, while connecting to the Redis server, we are facing some issue. While connecting to the Redis server, we are facing some issue, or our method is failed to execute. Our method is failed to execute. When this method is failed to execute, now what is happening? What is happening now? We are getting some exception. But I don't want to send this kind of exception to my client. Okay, client is sending a request to get the data. My application is trying to get the data from the Redis server. While executing that method, I'm getting some exception in my method. Whenever exception occurred in the method, it is sending exception stack trace to the client like this. It is sending exception stack trace to the client like this. Okay, now my requirement is whenever there is an exception in the method, I want to execute my fallback logic. I want to execute my fallback logic. Are you guys able to follow me? Are you guys able to follow me? Good. Now, I don't want to execute this exception. I don't want to get this exception stack trace. Whenever there is a problem, I want to execute that fallback logic. I want to execute that fallback logic. Now, in order to execute the fallback logic, let us see here. Let us see here. I'm writing one more method. 1 minute, guys. Right. Now, I'm going to write one method here, which is fallback method get to data from the DB. Get data from the DB. So here some logic will be available and I will return all right, guys. Now here I'm writing the logic for that return data fetching from database. Data fetching from database. Now see that. So there are two methods available. One method is going to get the data from the Redis. Another method is going to get the data from the database. So my requirement is whenever this method is failed, then I want to execute this method as a fallback method. What is the meaning of fallback method? If one method is failed due to some problem, due to some exception, I don't want to send the error message to the client. I don't want to send exception to the client. I want to execute a fallback method to send some response to the client. Here, M1 method is responsible to get the data from the Redis. M2 method is responsible to get the data from the database. So whenever the request comes M1, that means first method will execute to get the data from the Redis. If it is failed, then only I want to execute the M2 method. M2 method is my fallback method for the M1. So on behalf of M1, my M2 method should be executed. Are you guys clear? Now, when I send the request for this URL pattern, get data, what is happening now? What is happening now? That method is failed to execute. We are getting some exception. That exception we are sending to the client. Is it recommended or it is not recommended? Is it recommended or it is not recommended? It is not recommended. It is not recommended. Now, let me do one simple implementation. I'm writing this logic in the try block. I'm writing this logic in the try block. Now, I'm writing a logic in the catch block, exception E. Inside the catch block, I'm calling return get to data from the DB. Now, can you tell me what will happen in this scenario? Can you tell me what will happen in this scenario? Come on, guys. What will happen in this scenario? First, a request will go to the method to get the data from the Redis. There is an exception. Whenever exception occurs in the try block, it will go to the catch block. Inside the catch block, I'm calling the another method. So now, when there is an exception in the first method, then it will go to the second method, then it will execute that. If there is no exception in the first method, only first method will be executed, then second method will not be executed. Can I say it is a fallback logic now? When there is an exception in the first method, try block will execute. If exception occurs in the try block, it will go to the catch block. Inside the catch block, I am calling another method which will get the data from the database. Let's do this execution once. Stop this project, run it again. Yes, I don't know why DevTools not working here. Run as boot application. Yeah, application started. Send a request. Now what happened? Actually, we are sending the request to which method? First method. What is the responsibility of the first method? It should fetch the data from the Redis server. But what is the output we are getting? Fetching from the database. So main logic is executed or fallback logic is executed. Fallback logic is executed by using try and catch block. But writing the code like this is not recommended. Writing the code like this is not recommended. Why it is not recommended? Why it is not recommended? See the reason. See the reason. Here, I am writing the logic to get the data from the Redis server. Okay. If Redis server is down, if Redis server is not responding to our request, then we are getting some exception. Whenever exception occurred, then we are getting the data from the database. Okay. Today, from morning onwards, this Redis server is not responding. First request is sent to the Redis. It failed. Then in the catch block, we are getting the data from the database method. Second request also sent to the Redis. It is failed. We are getting the data from the database. Third request also failed. Fourth request also failed. Fifth request also failed. Continuously, 10 requests failed with the Redis server because the server is down. 10 times try block is executed. There is an exception. It is going to the catch block, calling the another method. Now here the question is, from morning 6 a.m. onwards till 9 a.m. from last 2 hours, Redis server is not responding. Redis server is not responding. When the Redis server is not responding, why to call the same method again and again? Already we know that there is a problem. The Redis server is down. When the Redis server is down, this method is executing. It is failing. It is going to the catch block, calling this method. First request came to this method, tried to access the data from the Redis. Redis is down. Exception occurred. We are into the catch block. In the catch block, we are calling this method. Third request came that also tried connecting with the Redis, failed, exception occurred, catch block, then calling this method. Same thing happening for fourth request, fifth request, 100th request also. When 100 requests are continuously failing for the Redis connectivity, what is the use of sending the next request also to the same method? Already we know that it is a failure. From the last 100 requests, we observed that it is a failure. In this scenario, when you observe continuously, if 10 requests are failed, then we need to divert the traffic. That is called circuit breaker. So currently, fallback logic is executing. But what is the problem? Every request is going to the first method. The first method is failed. Then it is going to the catch block. In the catch block, we are calling the method. That is, for one time it is okay. But continuously, for the last 100 requests, try block is failing, going to the catch block, calling the another method in the catch block. Same thing we are doing. Now the question is, when 100 times that method is failed to connect with the Redis server, do you think that 101 time will connect to the Redis server? 1 or 2 time will connect to the Redis? There is some problem. There is some problem. This method is having a problem to connect with the Redis server. When this method is failing continuously, why to access the same method again and again? Whenever the client request comes, Why to send that request to the same method again and again when there is a problem? So here what we need to do is, whenever this method is executed 5 times, if 5 times it is failed, then sixth time don't execute that method, directly execute the fallback method for next 30 minutes of time. So I need to give you a break for that method for 30 minutes. Why? Because it is already failing. So unnecessarily execute the try block, get the exception, go to the catch block, call another method in the catch block. Again go to try block, execute that, failed, go to catch block, execute the another method. Instead of doing this one, we need to apply circuit breaker concept here. What is the meaning of circuit breaker? Circuit breaker is used to develop fault-tolerant application. What is the meaning of that, guys? What is the purpose of circuit breaker? Circuit breaker is used to develop fault-tolerant applications. Nothing but no failures. Fault-tolerant. That means whenever there is a fault, whenever there is a problem, we should be able to execute a fallback logic. Nowadays, people are calling this as resilient application. Resilience applications we are going to develop. To develop fault-tolerant applications or resilience applications, we are going to use a concept called circuit breaker. What is the role that a circuit breaker will follow here? Okay, now let me write one more thing here. Now observe Redis method executing. Redis method executing. Here I am saying that DB method executing. Redis method is executing and DB method is executing. Let me run my application again, refresh, run as boot application. Okay. Observe the console. What is the order of the execution? Observe the console. What is the order of the execution? Go to the browser, send the request and monitor the console. Okay, I send a request. What happened, guys? First, which method is executed? Redis method. Then what happened? DB method. Why DB method is executed? There is a problem in the Redis method. Now send the request once again. Again, what happened? Redis method is executed, then DB method is executed. Third request, same process. Redis method is executed, DB method is executed. If I send this request continuously also, what is happening now? Redis method is executing, it is failing, then going for the DB method. I have observed Redis method is failing for 5 times. Then what we need to do is, when it is failing continuously for the 5 times, we need to stop sending the request to this method. Whenever we access this method, automatically this method should be executed for next 30 minutes of time. So what I want to do is, when we observe carefully, circuit breaker implementation. We understood what is a circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is used to develop fault-tolerant application. Some people will say circuit breaker is used to develop resilience applications. What is the meaning of fault-tolerant application? When there is a failure, we should handle that failure. We should not send that failure as it is to the client. Client is accessing our application. In our application, there is a failure. When there is a failure, we should not send that failure as it is to the client. We need to execute some fallback logic. So we need to handle that failure. Handling that failure, executing our application successfully is called fault-tolerant application. We can also call it as resilience application. By using this circuit breaker, we are going to develop fault-tolerant applications and resilience applications. Okay, this circuit breaker is a design pattern. When there is a failure in the microservice, let's execute a fallback logic. Are you guys clear? Now, So my requirement is, if whenever I am accessing this URL by using slash data, request is going to this method. This method is getting some exception. Then it is going to the catch block. Inside the catch block, I'm calling this method. Okay. Now, my requirement is, if this method is failing continuously, when whenever I'm sending a request to this method, whenever I'm sending a request to this method, if it is failing continuously, my request should not go to that method for next 30 minutes of time. So when I send a request to this URL pattern continuously 5 times, if this method is failed, sixth request onwards, directly go to this method, not for this method. For 30 minutes, you execute this method. After 30 minutes, again I will send 5 requests to this method. If these 5 requests are solved, that means if they are executing successfully, then continue with the first method. After 30 minutes also, again 5 requests are failed, then go to second method only for the next 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, again send 5 more requests to this method to check whether that method is working as for every 30 minutes. I will send 5 requests to the first method. If those 5 requests are executed successfully without any exception, the next request also will go to that first method only. If the 5 requests are failed for the next 30 minutes, you execute only fallback logic. But currently, what we have done here, if there is an exception in the try block, then only call that method in the catch block. I don't want to do like this. I want to use a concept called circuit breaker. What that circuit breaker will do? Circuit breaker will work with 3 statuses: open state, closed state, off open state will be available. If a circuit breaker is open, then that means only this method will be executed when you send a request. Whenever you send a request to this method, if a circuit breaker is closed, only this method will be executed. If 5 requests are failed continuously, then circuit breaker will open. When the circuit breaker is open, only this method will be executed for the given amount of time. When the given amount of time is completed, circuit breaker will come to off open state. Off open state means again it will send the request to the first method 5 times. If it is failed, again it will go to open state. Then only this method will be executed. If these 5 requests are successful, circuit breaker will be closed. If the circuit breaker is closed, only this method will be executed. Are you guys able to understand? So now, implementing fallback logic with the try-catch block is recommended. Implementing fallback logic with a circuit breaker is recommended. Implementing fallback logic with circuit breaker is recommended. Try-catch block is recommended. Circuit breaker. What is the problem with the try-catch block? What is the problem with the try-catch block? Every time it will go to the failure method. It will fail. Then it will go to the fallback method. When it is failing continuously for 10 times, what is the use of calling that method? Give some rest for that method to fix the problem. Then execute only second method for the given amount of time. After given amount of time is completed, again try to execute the first method, whether to check it is recovered or not. If it is recovered, no problem, we can continue with that. After 30 minutes also, if it is not recovered, then again I will continue with this method. So this implementation is called circuit breaker implementation in the microservices. So what is the purpose of circuit breaker in the microservices? What is the use of going for circuit breaker? Circuit breaker is used to implement fault tolerant system. So when there is a fault in our microservice, we need to execute some fallback logic. How to execute that fallback logic? When to execute the fallback logic? We need to give that information to the circuit breaker. Hey, circuit breaker, you observe 5 requests. If 5 requests are failed, then you open. What is the meaning of you open? If the circuit breaker is open, then only fallback logic will execute, main logic will not execute. What is the meaning of open? That circuit breaker open means this logic will not execute, only this logic will be executed. How much time only this logic should execute? You can configure. For next 10 requests, for next 30 minutes, you open the window. For next 10 requests or for next 30 minutes, you execute the fallback logic. After given amount of time is completed in the open state, circuit breaker will go to off open state. What is the meaning of off open state? What is the meaning of off open state? Some requests will come here, some requests will go there. Suppose I'm sending 3 requests here after 30 minutes. Again, those 3 failed. Then that is not recovered. Again, from off open, it will come back to open state. Suppose when I send 3 requests in the off open state, 3 requests are successful. Then circuit breaker will be closed. What is the meaning of circuit breaker will be closed? We will continue with the first method. You no need to write the try-catch blocks like this. Fault tolerant systems by using circuit breaker. Fault tolerant systems by using circuit breaker. Are you guys able to follow this? Good. So tell me, what is a circuit breaker and why we need to go for circuit breaker? What is the circuit breaker and why we need to go for circuit breaker? Circuit breaker is a design pattern. Circuit breaker is a design pattern. Circuit breaker is a design pattern which is used to implement fault tolerant system. Which is used to implement fault tolerant system. Okay, good. How do we configure this circuit breaker in our project? Okay. Now, here I have given some information related to circuit breaker. Yeah. Could you please read that? Circuit breaker, it is an electric concept. So why that circuit breaker is available in the electric concept? Come on, guys. It is used to protect us from high voltage or low voltage power. It is used to divert the traffic when some problem detected in the normal execution flow. We can use circuit breaker concept in our microservices to implement fault tolerant systems or resilience systems. When the main logic is failing continuously, then we have to execute fallback logic for some time. So if a main request failed 5 times, then I want to execute the fallback logic for the next 30 minutes. After 30 minutes completed, then again we need to go back to our main logic. Again, we need to go back to our main logic. So how do we implement that circuit breaker? Can you read the steps now? All right, guys. Now we need to go for circuit breaker implementation. So what is the implementation we need to do for the circuit breaker? Create one boot application with the below dependencies. What are the dependencies, guys? One is a web starter, actuator, AOP, and Resilience 4J. Resilience 4J dependency will be available like this. And we are going to create one model class. Okay. Then we are going to create one REST controller. Inside this REST controller, we are going to create one method. Then we are going to create one fallback method. Okay. Now, so see here, I am having one method. Let me remove this logic now. Let me remove this logic. Some logic is available in my method. Okay. So or else let me do one thing. Let me create one new project. Some dependency also missing. Let me create the new project. File new Spring Starter project. Circuit breaker application. What are the dependencies we need to add here? Web starter, actuator, web starter, actuator, AOP dependency. AOP is not coming. Okay, let me add that manually. Resilience 4J. Resilience 4J means how do we get that, guys? So if you type circuit breaker, then we are going to get as a resilience 4J. One thing we are not able to find, that is called AOP dependency. Web starter, resilience 4J, AOP and dev tools. Click on next and finish. Let me get that AOP dependency from previous project. AOP is not available here also. Okay, leave it. Yeah, my circuit breaker application is ready. Let me create one REST controller, new class, REST controller. Let me keep this in the REST package. Okay. At the rate REST controller, let's write one method, public string get data, something like this. System.out.println redis method called. Okay, return redis data sent to your email, something like this. Now I'm writing one more method, get data from DB. DB method called DB data sent to your mail, something like this. So here I'm writing integer I is equal to 10 by 0. Now let's go for at the rate get mapping with the slash data. At the rate get mapping with the slash data. Okay. So currently, is there any circuit breaker implemented here? Circuit breaker is not implemented here. Circuit breaker is not implemented here. Circuit breaker is not implemented here. Okay. Now let's execute this one and see the behavior. Refresh, run as boot application. Port number issue. Go to our properties file. Let us see server dot port is available 9090. Change this from properties file to YML file. Stop this. Do the Maven update. Update the project. Force update. Run as boot application. Yeah, it started. Now let's make a request to this method. I send the request. What happened now? Exception occurred. So fallback logic is executing. Fallback logic is not executing. Fallback logic is not executed. Why it is not executing? Why the fallback logic is not executing? We have not configured that circuit breaker here. So what we need to do is to configure the circuit breaker, we need to make few changes, guys. The first change is we need to configure this one. Circuit breaker name we need to configure. Circuit breaker properties we need to configure. circuit breaker name, and a circuit breaker properties we need to configure in our YML file. Okay, so in the YML file, we are going to configure a name for our application, and we are enabling actuator endpoints for our application, and we are configuring that circuit breaker properties. Okay, so what are these properties that we will discuss later point of time. So based on these properties, circuit breaker will decide when to come to the open state, when to go for the closed state, when to go for the off open state. That information will be taken care by circuit breaker. So with these properties only, circuit breaker will understand. Can you see what is this one? Sliding window size 10. Minimum number of calls 5. Permit number of calls in the off open state 3. Automatic transition from open to off open true. So wait duration in the open state 5 seconds. Failure rate threshold 50. Event consumer buffer size 10. So some basic clarity you got by reading these properties. So at how much time it should be there in the open state? When it should come to off open state? What is the minimum number of requests it has to monitor when there is a failure? That configuration we are doing here for the circuit breaker. For this circuit breaker, we have configured our properties. Okay, resilience for J circuit breaker default configuration we have done. Let's come to our method. In this method, we need to specify circuit breaker information. We need to specify our circuit breaker information. So by using one annotation called @circuit breaker annotation, we are going to specify what is our fallback method. What is our fallback method? Get to data from the database. That is our fallback method. Okay, name this can be anything, guys. I'm just giving the fallback method here. @circuit breaker with the fallback method. It is expecting define the attribute name. Okay, so let's add the name. You can give anything, something like this. What is the name for your circuit breaker? I'm giving the name as Ashok ID for the circuit breaker. What is this attribute fallback method? What is the meaning of the fallback method? Get to data from the DB. When it should get the data from the DB, when this method should be executed as a fallback method, that configuration is available in the YML file. Okay, now let's try this. Stop this. Refresh. Run as boot application. Go to console. Clear this console. It started. Now go to the server. Observe our console. I'm sending first request. When I send the first request, what happened, guys? What method is executed? Redis method is executed for the first time. I'm sending the request second time. Okay. Now observe second time what is happening now. Redis method only calling. Now send the request continuously. I'm sending my request continuously. Now, so every time which method is executing? The Redis method is getting executed. Redis method is called, Redis method is called, Redis method is called. So whenever we are sending a request, always the request is going to our Redis method. So is the circuit breaker is coming to the open state, or circuit breaker is not coming to the open state? Circuit breaker is not coming to the open state. Okay. So let me take this /actuator. So we have enabled actuator endpoint. Let's go to circuit breaker / circuit breakers. Currently, why it is not loading? We should be able to get that circuit breaker dashboard. In that circuit breaker dashboard, it will show what is the issue there and what is the status of that. Circuit breaker actuator health endpoint. Circuit current application status is up. Circuit breakers available. Circuit breaker status is unknown. Discovery composite status is unknown. Disk space is up, status is unknown. Why it is not detecting our circuit breaker? Always reduce method is calling. It is not going to the fallback method. Application name Resilience Forge. Exclude circuit breaker configuration. Get data from DB. Circuit breaker name. You can give any name for that. Right? AOP dependency, maybe because of that. Let's try adding. Here I have not added that AOP. Yeah, it is there, sir. Maybe because of this. Spring Boot starter, AOP dependency I have added. Let's do the Maven update once. Update the project, force update, refresh, run as boot application. Clear the console. Now, check this one. Data, failure is occurred. Then check the status of the circuit breaker now. Currently the status is up. What is the status of the circuit breaker? It is showing now. Currently the circuit breaker status is closed. How many failed calls happened now? One time I sent a request. You see what is the number of failed calls? There is a one failed call is available. Circuit breaker status currently it is showing as closed. Now go to our console, clear this one, send the request again. Two requests, third one, fourth one, fifth one, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 requests I have sent. Still it is failing. No such method. What is that? Get data from DB. The method signature should be same. Is the signature is not same? Okay. Yeah. Whatever the exception is occurred, when the fallback logic is executed, that exception will come back to the fallback method as a parameter. I have not taken that parameter, that's why it's failed. Let's stop it. Then do the rerun. Right click, run as boot application. Go to the console, clear this console. Now go here. Let us see the status of the circuit breaker now. Let us see the status of the circuit breaker. Currently, everything is coming as unknown. Let us make one request. I sent one request. Now, there is a failure. But what happened now? What happened now? Fallback logic is executed. How many number of failed calls available? One call is failed. What is the status now? Still it is closed. What is the meaning of closed? What is the meaning of closed? First method is executed, it failed, then it executed the second method. Okay, sit there for 5 minutes. First method is executed, it failed, then second method is executed. Now, send the request once again. Second request I have sent. What happened? Redis method is executed. Third request I have sent. Redis is executed. Fourth request I have sent. Redis executed. Fifth request, Redis executed. Sixth request, what is happening now? From sixth time, what is happening now? What happened here? Why only DB method is executed? Why only DB method is executed? Now you observe, first request, Redis method executed, it failed, then immediately fallback is executed. For second request also, Redis method executed, it failed, fallback method is executed. For third request also, Redis executed, failed, fallback is executed. For fourth method also, Redis executed, failed, fallback. For fifth method, Redis executed, failed, fall. 5 times it is already failed. Then my configuration is, when 5 requests are failed continuously, circuit breaker you come into open state. When the circuit breaker came to the open state, what happened here? Is it executing the first request, first method, or it is not executing the first method? Not executing the first method. It is going for only fallback method. After executing the fallback method for 5 seconds of time, then what it has done again? Off open state. What is the meaning of off open state? Again it will go to the first method. So it will check first method for 3 to 4 minutes of 3 to 4 requests. Again those requests are failed. Again will come to open. After 5 seconds of time, again it will go back to off open. From the off open it will try to go to open or closed, depends on the situation. Now clear the console. Observe once again. I'm going to my browser. Currently, you check the status of the circuit breaker. Failed calls are available. What is the status now? Circuit breaker status is off open. What is the meaning of off open? It will try with the first method only. Now, send the request 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So many requests I have sent. What is happening now? Only it is executing the DB method. Check the status of the circuit breaker. Now it is coming back to off open state. Once it comes to off open, again I will send the request. Redis method is called. Okay. Send the request continuously and see the status of the circuit breaker. When it is coming to the open, if the first method is failing continuously for 5 times, it is coming to the open. How much time it will stay in the open state? 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, it will go back to off open. What is the meaning of open, off open, closed? Initially, circuit breaker will be in the closed state. Initially, circuit breaker will be available in the closed state. So what is the meaning of closed state for the circuit breaker? What is the meaning of closed state for the circuit breaker? What is the status of closed? First method will execute. 5 times if the first method is failed, it will come to off open. It will come to open. First time, 5 requests are going to first method. 5 requests are failed. It will come to open. In the open state, only fallback logic will execute. So for 5 seconds only fallback logic is executed. After 5 seconds of time, I'm telling to go back to off open state. When it go to off open state, as per my configuration, 3 requests should go to the first method. It is send 3 requests to the first method. Those 3 also failed. Again, it is coming to open state. If these 3 are success, it will go to closed state. Now, am I writing any try-catch block here to execute the fallback logic? You see in our program, am I writing any try-catch block to execute our logic? I'm not writing any try-catch block to execute our fallback method. So first, we are sending the request to this method. For this method, we configured circuit breaker annotation. For this method, we have given our fallback method also. For the fallback method, you need to take throwable as a parameter. If you do, what is the meaning of this throwable? Super class for all the exception. Whatever the exception occurred here, that exception will come as a parameter to your method. Okay. Now here, these properties are available. So if you see these properties, some properties you can easily understand. Minimum number of calls, 5. So that means observe 10 calls. Out of 10, if 5 calls are failed, then it will go to open state. When it is in the open state, what we are doing? Automatic from open to off open enable. After 5 seconds of time, automatically you come back to off open. You see here, sliding window size is 10. You observe 10 requests. Circuit breaker, you monitor 10 requests. Out of 10, if minimum 5 failed, if 5 requests are failed, then you automatically go to open state. How much time it should stay in the open state? 5 seconds. Then automatically from open, you go to off open also. In the off open, how many number of requests you need to try? Only 3. So if 5 requests failed continuously, you go to open state. In the open state, you stay for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you come to off open. In the off open, you try 3 requests again for the first method. With these 3 are success, then go to close. If 3 are fail, go to again open state. So this is our circuit breaker configuration. So what is the benefit with this circuit breaker we are getting? What is the benefit we are getting with this circuit breaker? We are getting fault tolerant system. So when there is a problem in my microservice, am I sending error response to the client? Now you see what is the response coming to the client now. Client is sending a request for a data method. Data method is a map data URL pattern. Data URL pattern mapped to which method? Redis method. But Redis method is executed as expected. Redis method not executed as expected. Not executed. So error is coming to the client. Error is not coming to the client. Error is not coming to the client. Then what is the response coming to the client? DB method is calling. So DB method is calling directly. Without first method, only second method is executed. When only second method will be called, only fallback method will be called. In which scenario, only our fallback method will be called? In which scenario, only our fallback method will be called? Based on the circuit breaker status. How many statuses available for circuit breaker? 3 statuses available for the circuit breaker. What are those 3 statuses for the circuit breaker? Closed, open, off open. What is the meaning of closed state? Only first method will be called. It will fail, it will go to second method. How much time it will be in the closed? Till the given limit reached. What is my limit? 5. If a 5 request failed continuously, it will go to open. When the circuit breaker come to open state, what is the meaning of that? First method will not execute. Only fallback method will be executed. How much time it will stay in the open state? 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, you can configure 30 minutes also. I configured 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, what is happening? Automatically, it is coming back to off open. What is the meaning of off open? Go to the first method. How many requests will go to first method? I given 3. 3 requests will go to first method. If 3 successful, closed. If 3 failed, again open. How much time? 5 seconds. After 5 seconds again, off open. In the off open, 3 requests. If 3 successful, closed. If 3 failed, open. So this is called fault tolerant system. To develop this fault tolerant system, we are using circuit breaker with resilience 4J. So what is the dependency we are using in the Spring Boot? Resilience 4J dependency we are using to develop fault tolerant application by using circuit breaker. This circuit breaker is a design pattern. Circuit breaker is a design pattern which is used to develop fault tolerant system. Okay, suppose in the first method, if the exception is not coming, what is the status of the circuit breaker? Closed. When the circuit breaker is closed, what will happen? Always the first method will be executed. Circuit breaker comes into picture only when there is a problem in the first method. Are you guys clear? Good. So I hope you understood what is a circuit breaker and why we need to go for circuit breaker. So what is a circuit breaker? Why? Maniganda, Anje, 9 o'clock class, JRTP. Yeah. So what is the circuit breaker and why we need to go for circuit breaker? Yeah. Here, this is our circuit breaker, guys. Implementation is little different here. In the previous, I have used a different concept. I mean, different example. Here, I have used a different example. That's it. See the first step, create a boot application with the dependencies. Then what is the second step? Create a REST controller. Create REST controller. There are two methods available. Then configure circuit breaker properties, then run the application and monitor our circuit breaker behavior. So please try this application development before coming to next session. Okay. So if anybody having any questions on this, guys, please post in the group. I will answer. I have another class at 9 o'clock. I am already late 15 minutes for that. Okay. So we will continue again on Monday. So if you have any questions on the circuit breaker, I will clarify on the Monday. Then we will start Spring Security from the Monday. Okay. Good. Thank you.